Sultans of Swift, it's Prof. Gene. Are you ready to become Toolbar Titans and Sheet superheroes? Well, in this lesson, we're going to begin to build out our to-do list app interface. And while we do that, we're going to learn about toolbars, sheets, and full screen covers. So let's learn big! So we're starting to mock up the user interface in our app. Our initial to-do list view screen is looking a bit like we want. Now we're eventually going to want to show a completed checkbox in here and be able to click that to toggle it. We'll do that later. But right now, if we click on any of the rows in the list, we'll navigate over to the detail view, and this detail view doesn't look at all like what we want. So most of this lesson is going to be spent creating the detail view. But before we start working the detail view interface, let's increase the font of the items in this list. I think they'd look a little bit better if they were larger, so right under the navigation link, I'm going to add a font modifier, passing in .title2, and I think that looks better with those items slightly larger. Now let's head to the detail view file and code up the detail view user interface. And let's start by deleting everything inside of the body property. So we're not even going to include the VStack here. Instead, we're going to organize our detail view using a list. So we can just enter list with a capital L and open and close curlies. And the first item inside those curlies is going to be a text field to hold our to-do item. It's a text field because the user is going to enter data. A text view is display only. So I'll enter text field inside the list. I'm going to select the option with the title key and text. The first part, the title key, is just a placeholder text that we see inside the field. So I'm going to enter the string enter to do here. But when we tab over to this next parameter, oh yeah, this is a binding value. So we need to create an @state variable to hold this data because this to-do item is going to change. And remember, @state will keep the data inside of this value from being destroyed when we destroy and recreate the interface. And we need to enter it as a binding value, so we need to put a $sign in front of it when we enter it into this parameter. So up to the top, we're no longer going to use this variable called past value, so I'm going to highlight and delete that. Then @state, and we're not going to use the keyword private at this time. We'll just say @state var. And I'm going to name this to-do lower camel case for all of our variables. And we're not going to set this variable equal to something. We're going to declare it but not initialize it. So we just say colon after the variable name and then the type of the variable this is, which is a string. Now the reason we do this is if we don't set the variable equal to anything, instead we just declare it and not initialize it, then this means we need to pass a value into this declared but uninitialized variable. And you'll see that we're going to do this from our to-do list view in just a bit. Now this is related to the reason why we get rid of the keyword private. You see, that keyword private will limit access of our variable to just the struct where it's defined, right in here. But in this case, that would be a bad thing for us to do because we want to refer to this variable from an entirely different file, from the to-do list view, because in that file, that's where we're going to pass the to-do list into this variable. So we need to see this variable from another file. And if that's not clear to you right now, I'll show you exactly how this works and why it's important in just a bit. And back in the text field, I'm going to enter as a second parameter the binding value in here, $to-do. Now down here in preview, remember this is the view that renders the code on the canvas, and this line now recognizes that we deleted the variable past view. But if I highlight the parentheses and delete this, I'll press delete one more time to get rid of the W and then retype the W, and then code completion shows me detail view with the option for the to-do parameter. I'm going to select this and press return, and for now we'll just pass in an empty string. Now the error goes away, and I don't see any problems in this file, but we do see we have an error circle in the upper right. So if I click on this, we see there's a problem in the to-do list view. So let's select this, we jump to the error, and aha! This called the detail view refers to the old past view variable that we just deleted. So let's do the same thing we just did. We're going to delete the parentheses and the last letter, and when we retype W in detail view, code completion pops up, and I see an option here shows one with to-do and dismiss. I think this is an Xcode bug because dismiss is an environment variable to handle the screen dismissal. Xcode shouldn't be asking me to pass a variable into this value, but this is the only option I see, so I'm going to press return to select it, and then I'm just going to delete from the comma through the dismiss value. And for to do, what I'm going to pass in here is to do, which is this element of the to-dos array that we're iterating through in the for each statement up here. Now we see the preview canvas is working. I can click a value, and the to-do value that I click in the to-do list view was passed over to the detail view. It shows up in our text field, and I can click this to-do list back button, and things are working fine. We're passing data from one view to another. Nice. Now, I promised to point out why removing the keyword private was important, so let's head back to the detail view, and if I add private in front of var to-do here, this tells Xcode that the to-do variable is private for this struct. So it's only available inside the detail view struct. It can't be accessed by any other views. So we won't be able to see it when we type detail view in the to-do list view, and we also can't refer to the private value to-do in our detail view call in the preview down here. See, the error says private makes this inaccessible, so you can't refer to this outside of the initial struct that we have up here. Private says it's only available inside this struct. Now in the upper right-hand corner, we see that we've got another error, and we can see that if we head back to our to-do list view. And again, if we head back to the to-do list view, the private keyword also breaks this line here. The error we're getting says detail view initializer inaccessible due to the private protection level. So private protects a value from being visible outside of that struct where it's defined in that other file. Normally, limiting access to variables is a good thing if those values aren't used outside of a file. It prevents those values from showing up in code completion, and this can be useful because if developers shouldn't be accessing those variables, it prevents them from accidentally selecting values they shouldn't have access to. But in this case, we really do want the to-do variable in the detail view to be accessible outside of that struct in other files. So if we remove the private keyword, once we do that, all of our errors go away, our preview works, and we can pass data into this variable from another file. Cool. Now, before that quick aside, we were working on this text field, and I'd like the font for this to-do to be a little bit larger, so underneath this, I'm going to enter a .font modifier, passing in .title, and I'm also going to set my .textfield style to .rounded border, and that's starting to look a little bit better. This list is currently organized using the default format, though, which is the inline grouped format, which has got this gray background and gray borders here. You might like this, but since my prior screen has the list style plain, I'm going to set this screen to plain too. So just before the closing curly in the list, I'm going to enter the .list style modifier and pass in .plain. Next, we'll add a toggle to set our reminder, so we'll enter toggle, select the option with title key and the isOn parameters, and the title key is just the string that's to the left of the toggle, so I'm going to enter the string setReminder, in here, and then isOn is another binding variable, so let's head up to the top and create another state variable with @state private var reminder isOn is what we'll call this, and we'll set it equal to false initially. Now you might be wondering why we used private here. Now that's because we're not passing a value into reminder isOn, so we don't need to access this outside of this struct, but hold tight, because in a future lesson we're going to see that all the variables we're using when we create the interface here are just temporary. We're eventually going to replace all these individual variables in these different views with a single custom to-do variable, which will contain a bunch of individual property values inside of it for the to-do list title, the reminder, date, notes, and anything else that we save. That's coming. Hang in there. Right now, we're just going to set up our interface. Then we'll set the binding variable down in the toggle to $reminder_is_on. Now below this, we'll enter a date picker. That'll be associated with a set reminder toggle, so enter date picker, select the option with title key and selection. The title key is just the string that's to the left of the date picker, so I'm going to enter the string date in here. And for the binding variable, you guessed it, we need to add another state variable. So up top, why don't we say @state private var, why don't we call this due date? And this is going to be a special iOS data type called date, capital D, that keeps track of a date and time combined in one value. And we could set this equal to capital D date.now, but that would set it to the current date and time. And you usually don't want to set up a to-do item that's due immediately right now. So it's up to you what you'd like to put in here, but why don't we set it up 1 day from now? So in order to do this, I'm going to say date.now plus, and we can do date addition simply by adding a number of seconds to any date value. So how many seconds are in a day? 60 seconds times 60 minutes times 24 hours. Then I'll enter my binding variable in the date picker as $due date. And if we compare the date and time with the clock in the upper right of my Mac, we see that the time is the same, but the date is 1 day later. So our date math works perfectly. But I do want to introduce you to one other technique for adding values to dates. The setup requires a few components, but it's more flexible than calculating the number of seconds. And that's by performing date math using a date function inside of the calendar class. So to show you how to do this, I'm going to first highlight the line that sets up the due date variable, copy it, paste a duplicate below, and then I'll command slash on the first due date setup line. That comments the line out. And then below this, I'm going to delete the seconds calculation. And instead, I'm going to say this equals calendar with a capital C, dot current, which refers to use the current calendar, not the current date, then dot date, which gives us several options for creating a date. And we want to select the one that's date by adding value to. Now, code completion says that this is going to return a new date calculated by adding an amount of a specific component, like a day or a week or a month. In our case, it's going to be a day, to a given date. Now, one thing we want to be aware of is you see how this has an arrow after the function with capital D date question mark next to it? That means that this is an optional, and it could potentially return nil if the calculation is invalid. But I'm going to be completely confident in my calculation of adding one day to today, so I'm going to force unwrap this with an exclamation mark. We'll do that in a bit. So let's select this by pressing return, and we'll fill in these values. Now, the first part wants a calendar component. We want to add days, so we'll just say dot day, then tab over to value. How many days do we want to add? Just one. Then we'll tab over to 2, and what date are we going to add one day to? Well, that's going to be capital D date dot now. Now again, we're getting an error in here, and if we option click on the date function, again, we're reminded that date question mark means this could be an optional date. Now I am confident that this calculation is going to work, so I'm just going to enter an exclamation mark after this to force unwrap this value to get rid of the nil. There are other ways to do this, but I'm pretty comfortable using an exclamation mark here. My calculation's correct. And just so you know, if I change the value parameter from 1 to 3 over here, this is going to add 3 days to today, and I can see the date picker in my preview now has a value that's 3 days ahead of the date on my max clock. Very cool, but I'm going to undo to go back to 1 because I just want to add 1 day, not 3. Now in the text field, it's a little bit close to my set reminder toggle. I'd like a bit of gap between these different views to provide a visual grouping, so it seems like the set reminder and the due date are close together, they're related, but there is a separation between the values for the text field and the toggle below it. So I'm going to add a padding modifier right underneath the text field, and I'm going to pass in dot vertical, and I'm going to add a padding modifier to the toggle, and I'm going to pass in dot top, and this gives us a nice spacing between those views. And now another thing that we see is between the various views in the list, there's a faint horizontal line between them. Now this is called the list row separator, and we can enter a modifier to eliminate this between views. So any view where we don't want the separator, we can add a dot list row separator. I've done that right below the text field. Xcode says that this displays the mode for the separator associated with this specific row. That's what I want. Press return to accept this. And I can pass in dot hidden. That hides the separator line. Now I'm going to copy this from below the text field, which is where I first put this, and paste it below the toggle and the date picker view. And now I've got no separator lines in my preview. I think this looks a bit better. Now let's set up a notes area with a text view and a text field. The text view is the label that says notes, while the text field is where you enter the notes. So I'll enter text for a text view, and I'll pass in the string notes with a colon, and I'll add a padding modifier below this, passing in dot top. Below this, add a text field view. Select this option with the title key, text, and axis, and this is going to allow the text field to expand in either the horizontal or vertical direction. So press return to accept this. The title key in here will just be the string notes. That's what's going to show up as sort of placeholder text in this text field. And then we need another binding variable to hold the notes, so up top we'll add @state private var notes, setting this equal to the empty string. And now we can add $notes to the text parameter of the text field. And if you tab over to axis and press a dot, we can see we can add a vertical dimension, which means that the text field will actually expand downward vertically if more text space is needed. So we'll select vertical, press return. I'll also add a text field style modifier, setting this to rounded border, and I can copy the line row separator hidden from above and paste it down below. And now below this, I want a toggle that will say completed. So I'm just going to copy my set reminder toggle above, paste it below my last text field, change the text string from set reminder to completed, and of course we need another state variable up top. So we'll add @state private var is completed and set this equal to false. Then we'll replace the last toggle's binding variable with the $is completed. And our interface looks good. I think we could use some bottom padding after the date picker, so I'll add that. But now the distance between the elements looks solid, and I like how the related text views are grouped with the views that they describe. And now check out the notes field where I added the axis. If I add some nonsense characters in this, copy them, and keep pasting them in, I can see eventually the text field expands vertically. That's what the axis modifier does. Nice! Now I also see that my date picker allows me to pick a date and time even if the set reminder is off, and I want to disable the date picker unless the set reminder toggle is turned on. Now remember, we're keeping track of the set reminder toggle in a variable named reminder_is_on, so we've done something like this in previous lessons. We can add a .disabled modifier under the date picker, and we want to disable the date picker if the set reminder is not set, so that's when the reminder_is_on is false. So what we want to do here is pass in the opposite of what the toggle shows. And we can do this with an exclamation mark, reminder_is_on. And now over here in the preview, since the default for a reminder_is_on is set to false, we see the toggle is off and the date picker is disabled. See how there's no background around the date picker elements? But when we turn this set reminder toggle on, this sets the reminder_is_on value to true, which passes in a false because of the exclamation point before it into the disabled property, which stops the date picker from being disabled. So now we can enter a date and time. Switch the set reminder toggle back off again, and we can no longer access the date picker. Cool. Next up, I want to add cancel and save buttons in a navigation bar at the top of this screen. Now, when we set up buttons in a navigation bar at the top of the screen, that's the toolbar area, we want to have at least 3 different kinds of components: a toolbar modifier, a toolbar item view, and then a button. So it's going to look like this. We have .toolbar modifier, then inside the toolbar's curlies, we have a toolbar item view for each of the items we want our toolbar. We're going to have 2 of those since we have 2 buttons, one for cancel and one for save. And then inside of the toolbar item is where we add our button. The first one will say cancel on the left-hand side, and the one on the right-hand side will say save. Now, in order for a toolbar modifier to show up, it needs to be inside of a navigation stack. Now, the way navigation stacks work is if you navigate to a view that's inside of a navigation stack, then the view will slide over the existing view coming in from the right, and the view that slides in over the current view, in this case our detail view, inherits the navigation stack from the parent view. So in this case, since we navigate to the detail view, the parent view is the to-do list view file that we're in. And you see how we have a navigation stack in the to-do list view code? And we're calling the detail view inside of this navigation stack. So you don't need a navigation stack in your detail view since we're inheriting this from the parent view from the to-do list view. Now we are going to run into a problem when we want to preview the toolbar in the detail view, but I'll demonstrate the problem, then you'll see what it is in case you encounter it on your own, and you'll know how to fix it. So now back here in our detail view code, we're already getting that navigation stack from the to-do list view. So we're going to add our toolbar right here at the bottom of the list view. We don't need an extra navigation stack. So down here with the list view modifiers, I can say .toolbar, and I can select the option with content and press return for trailing closure, or I can just say .toolbar and open a curly brace. Then inside the toolbar modifiers curly, we need a toolbar item view. So we can type in toolbar item. We get a few options in here, and we want both the placement and the content parameters. Now to get those both to show up in code completion, I type toolbar item and continue to type PLAC, and we can see placement is highlighted. And if I type in CON, we can see content is also highlighted. So when I press return on this, code completion adds the toolbar item with the placement and the content parameters. Just what I want. Now placement is where we want the toolbar item to show up. If I press a dot here, I want this to be in my top bar, so I can type in top, and there's an option for top bar leading. Leading means left. Select that. Then we tab over to content, we can press return for the trailing closure, and in here is where we put whatever we want to show up. And the view we want to show up in the upper left-hand corner is a button. So we can type in button and select the option with title and action. The title is going to be cancel, tab over and press return to get a trailing closure for our action. And remember, we have an environment variable that handles dismiss. So inside the button's curlies, all we do is enter lowercase dismiss with open and close parens. But oh no, my friends, the toolbar and cancel button are not showing up. This is the problem that I alluded to earlier. What gives? Well, the issue is, since we're in the detail view file here, our preview only knows what it sees in this file. When we run our code from the beginning, we have the navigation stack in that previous file, the parent file, a to-do list file, but we don't have it in this file here. The preview just knows what it sees in this file, but watch this. If we head back to our to-do list file, and in the preview in the canvas, if we click on an item in the list, oh wow, we see we've got a toolbar with a cancel button in the upper left, the top bar leading area. Now the reason why we can see it this way is the preview over here started in the to-do list file that has the navigation stack, then we open the detail view from inside that navigation stack, so it correctly shows the toolbar. The toolbar's got to be inside a navigation stack. But there's another problem. We get this ugly back button here with the chevron that says to-do list. We don't want that, but we'll take care of that in just a bit. First, let's figure out how we get the toolbar to show up when we're working on our detail view. So our code is going to work. It's written fine. The only problem that we have is when we write code with the detail view open and we want to see our toolbar items, we can't see it. But the solution here is pretty simple. All we need to do is to head down to the detail view's preview area and embed or surround this call to detail view in a navigation stack. Now the code in the preview area only handles what we see in the canvas preview, but once we do this, we get our toolbar up and working. We now see the cancel button. Nice. Problem solved. And so let's add another toolbar item for the save button. We can do that right inside this same toolbar modifier. So I'm going to copy the toolbar item that we just created for cancel, paste it down below the cancel toolbar item, change the string from cancel to save, and change the placement. So we'll delete .topbar leading and we'll press .topbar and select trailing, which will be on the right for left to right language systems. And I'm going to delete the dismiss inside of the button action, and I'm going to replace that with just a to-do that says add save code here. And this looks good. Let's head over to the to-do list file and run this from the preview in here and then navigate over to the detail view. And we see that gnarly unwanted to-do list back button that harshes our mellow. We don't need this anymore because we're going to be using cancel and save, but we learned how to eliminate this in the last lesson. Just add a navigation back bar button hidden modifier. So let's return to detail view, and down here with the list view modifiers, I'm going to add a new modifier, .navigation back bar hidden. And if we check this again back in our to-do list view, everything looks exquisite. Now a quick challenge. On our to-do list view screen here, we want to add a button in the upper right-hand corner, so that means toolbar. And we don't want to use text for this button. Instead, we want to use a system image with a plus sign. We're going to use that to add a to-do item. Now, one small but important hint, when you add your toolbar modifier on your to-do list view, you want to make sure that you're adding it inside of the navigation stack's curlies, not below it. So you should know how to do all of this. Why don't you pause, give this a shot, and you can roll back the video if you need help, or you can refer to the code that you already wrote on the detail view. And when you're ready, press resume, and let's compare answers. So for the toolbar, we need a navigation stack, which we already have in the to-do list view, but we do need to add a toolbar modifier inside the navigation stack. So I'm going to do this below my list style, and then inside this toolbar modifier, I'm going to add a toolbar item view, selecting the option with placement and content. Remember, we do that by adding the first few letters of the word placement and the word content. The placement will be top bar trailing. That's going to move this over to the right, and I'll tab to content, press return to get the trailing closure. And with a toolbar modifier and the toolbar item added, the last thing we add is the button itself. And since we want the image of a plus sign, let's select the button option with the action and the label. So press return for the trailing closures. I'm going to tab over to the label curlies, and this is where we're going to add our image. Now we want to select the image option with system name, and in between the double quotes of the string, if you guessed it's plus, P-L-U-S, you're right. But if not, you could have gone to the library plus sign in the upper right-hand corner, clicked on that, checked inside the symbols tab, you could have searched on the word plus, and if you scroll through here, sure enough, you'll see the full large plus sign is P-L-U-S, all in lowercase. Double click that, and Xcode will fill out the string for you. Then back up in the action closure for the button, we'll enter a double slash to do comment and say add button action here. Now you might think all we need to do now is add a navigation link inside the button action and that'll give us the navigation that we want. But that's not good enough for us. We want to up our game in iOS development and make sure that we adhere to Apple's human interface guidelines. And the standard for creating data isn't for a view to slide in over from the right like this. This is what we see when we want to view existing data, like when we click on any of the navigation links, or when we want to modify data, and eventually we'll be able to modify data from these navigation links as well. But the standard for adding data is actually to place a view on top of the existing view, almost like a screen laying on top of another screen. And you'll see this in other apps. For example, here we're viewing a contact in Apple's Contacts app. See how it slides in from the right? But if we want to create a new contact with this plus button here, we slide up from the bottom, and this looks like a view screen is laying on top of another screen. Apple calls this presentation a sheet. Now we see similar things with other apps. Here's the calendar app. We're looking at an event. It slides in from the right, but to create a new event, the sheet comes up from the bottom. In the reminder app, same thing. Existing reminder comes in from the right, but create a new reminder, and that comes up from the bottom in a sheet. Now, you might not have even noticed this, but some users will notice subtle differences in app behavior if our app doesn't behave like standard Apple apps. So let's learn how to do a sheet presentation in iOS if you click on that plus button. So to present a sheet, we'll add a sheet modifier. Now, we could place this in a few locations. I like to place it at the bottom of the list, since the list is where my navigation links are, and my sheet sort of acts like a navigation too, since I'm showing another view. So below the list of list modifiers, I'm going to enter .sheet, and I'm going to select the option with is presented and content highlighted. Now, Xcode says this presents a sheet when a binding Boolean value that you provide is set to true. So this means to present this, we simply set a Boolean value in the is presented parameter to true, and we'll do that with our button press. We'll get to that in a bit. For now, press return to accept this, and we need a binding Boolean value. So up top, that means we need to create a new state variable. So why don't we say @state private var, and we'll call this sheet is presented, and set it initially to false since the sheet isn't presented when we start our app. Then back in the sheet modifier, we can pass in our binding variable as $sheet is presented. Then I'll tab over to the content, press return for the closure, and this looks like a bug in my Xcode. Xcode didn't format this as a true trailing closure, so I'm going to delete everything after the comma and then enter the closing paren and an open and close curlies, and inside our closure, this is where we enter the view that we want to present. Now, whenever we work with sheets, we don't use navigation links. The sheet itself will present whatever is inside this content closure. So all we need to do is to enter the view that we want to present. That view is going to be detail view. For now, I'll pass in the empty string since this is going to be a blank to do. We'll update that in a later lesson. But now, how do I trigger the sheet to show? Now remember, code completion said that whatever we pass in for our is presented parameter should be set to true. Toggling that value to true is what we do inside of our button action. But instead of actually saying sheet is presented equal to true, I'm going to say sheet is presented and use the .toggle method. This has got parentheses afterward because it is a function. All this does is turn true to false and false to true. Now the sheet is presented modifier will turn this back to false when we exit the detail view. So every time we click on the plus button, it's going to set this equal to true. So let's try this out in the preview. Are you ready? And ooh, almost. So we see we have this card presentation where our view slides up from the bottom and it overlays the existing view, but we're missing our toolbar. You can pull down to dismiss, but that's not what we want. Well, what gives here? Well, even though we've got the sheet modifier technically inside of the curlies of the navigation stack, it's not considered to be part of the navigation stack. So since there's no navigation stack used for this detail view presentation, we don't see our toolbar. That's expected, but we also know how to solve this. Just like preview, if this detail view doesn't have a navigation stack, well, we can embed it in a navigation stack, then our toolbar will show up. So I'm just going to right-click on detail view. The quick action menu does not have an embedded navigation stack. I'm going to select embed in HStack, then change HStack to navigation stack. Now we're embedded in a nav stack. So if we click on the plus button, sweet Johnny Ive, will you look at that? The view pops up from the bottom. It's placed over an existing list, card style, nice. And if we click on any individual element in the list as if we wanted to view or edit it, it slides over from the right. Now, truth be told, I actually don't like the sheet presentation that Apple changed a few versions of iOS ago. This is where we see this top of the screen that looks sort of like a card on top of our existing screen. I think this is an unnecessary use of screen real estate up top. And if you don't like this and you'd rather the sheet take up the entire screen, you do have an option for this. So instead of using the sheet modifier, we've got a modifier called FullScreenCover, but it works in the same exact way. So in my code, I'm going to highlight my sheet modifier, but I'm going to change the word sheet in the modifier to FullScreenCover. And after I type that, if I press escape, Xcode won't force any of the parameters in. And now when I try this in the preview, I see the same slide up effect, but this time it covers the entire screen instead of leaving that sort of card-like overlay at the top. Now we can use either of these. I suppose it's best to use Apple's standard with the sheet view, so I'm going to switch back to this. But if we're creating new values on a separate screen, and then this screen needs to create additional values, then if we're navigating to multiple pages from the sheet, it might make sense to use a full screen cover presentation instead of the sheet. So our user interface is looking pretty good, but the next big thing we want to tackle is passing data back and forth between our screens. Now we learned how to pass static data, but this data is going to be dynamic, and it's also going to be complicated because we have an array of to-do items, but if we click a single element in our list, we want to work with only one item at a time. Also, if we head over to the detail view file and take a look up top, Right now we've got a lot of variables in here for just a single to-do. Well, in our next video, we're going to show you how you can create your own multi-property type using a Swift class, and that's going to be vital for using SwiftData to save data on our device. We'll be able to create an array of to-do items where each item has all of these properties here. So it'll be easy for us to pass back a single to-do item that has all of these properties. So feel good about the learning in this lesson where we covered toolbars, sheets, full screen cover, and built a cool interface. But there's lots more big learning to come. Stay Swifty, my friends.